Hi, my name is Mia. I'm 17. Have you ever argued with your best friend over a boyfriend so that she blocked you and didn't want to see you at all? Watch this video to the end and you will learn how I tried to seduce the fiancé of my close friend to prove that he was a womanizer and how it all ended. I have a best friend, Olivia, who is 19 and about to get married. We were close from childhood, our parents were friends all the time, and we are also now inseparable. I am interested in psychology. I have always been interested in understanding why people act in a certain way. What is the secret of a happy family relationship? How to find yourself in this life? I had a lot of questions, and I hope to find answers to them with the help of psychology. Together with Olivia, we started going to lectures at the psychological club in our town. I read a lot of articles on the internet and shared it with a friend. But then she started skipping classes, and she didn't even have time to read. She met Ed and fell head over heels in love with him. Olivia even stopped talking to me and spent all her free time with her boyfriend. I believe that friendship is stronger than love, but I did not judge Olivia, knowing her romantic and passionate nature. I was curious to see what she saw in Ed. Have your friends ever sacrificed your friendship for the sake of the new guy? Have they rescheduled your meetings, postponed your joint plans, and all for the sake of another passion? And then one day, a month after our last conversation, Olivia called me very happy and said that she was getting married. I was a little offended. My best friend was getting married, and she told me this over the phone, not in person, and I still hadn't met her future husband. But then, Olivia said that the wedding was in 2 weeks, and she wanted me to be a bridesmaid and help with the arrangements. I loved Olivia very much, and I couldn't say no to her. I was happy to help her. We began to choose the place of the ceremony together and ordered a wedding cake from a pastry shop. Olivia really wanted the beautiful memories of the wedding to remain and asked me to find a picturesque place for a photo shoot. I knew a place and suggested my friend to go there, but Olivia was too busy trying on a custom-made wedding dress, so she sent Ed instead. I didn't mind. It was an excuse to get to know him better. We didn't have much time to get to know each other in this pre-wedding rush. I wanted to know what kind of person he was because I was worried about my friend. We went to the coast with Ed, and he was very nice and joked all the way. I found myself actually liking him. But friendship was sacred to me. We arrived at the site, took a few test shots, choosing the best angle. And then, during one of those funny selfies, Ed kissed my neck like he was rehearsing a wedding photo. I was embarrassed by what he did. He laughed it off and said that he had imagined Olivia instead of me. I forced a smile, but something inside me skipped a beat. I thought it was strange. I felt awkward. I didn't want to upset Olivia. I decided to finish the photo session and quickly go home. I was uncomfortable being alone with Ed. It was as if nothing had happened to him. He was still sweetly joking and smiling at me. I sent Olivia pictures from the coast, but I deleted that one with a kiss. My friend was delighted with the scenery and thanked. I was a little ashamed that I hadn't told her what had happened. Although maybe I was imagining it. Ed was actually posing for the camera, rehearsing a wedding kiss with Olivia. Olivia had to choose a wedding bouquet and decoration of the hall. So we met at the flower salon. When she was discussing all the details with the florist, I decided to go to the coffee shop across the street for coffee, because it was going to be a long day. I wanted to cheer up a little. As I walked across the road, I looked around and saw couples in love, and I was very glad that many people found their second halves and lived happily. I even envied Olivia for a second that she too had found the love of her life, and I was now practically without a friend. While I was thinking about it, I looked at the windows of the house that had a coffee shop and saw a couple kissing in one of them. And the guy looked a lot like Ed. I went closer to see, and I was right. It was Ed, and he was making out with a strange girl. I couldn't believe that Ed was cheating on Olivia while she was getting ready for their wedding. I quickly took the coffee and went back with the clear intention of telling Olivia everything. She didn't deserve to be treated like this. She had to know the truth. But when I got back to the store, I found her so happy and in flowers. Olivia chose white roses. She said they were a symbol of her pure love. She confessed that she was madly in love with Ed, and if something happened to him and he disappeared from her life, she would simply die of grief. She wanted me to understand her feelings. And instead of turning Ed in, I didn't say anything. I was afraid of breaking my friend's heart, and I didn't know how best to tell her that Ed was a traitor and a cheater. What would you do if you were me? How often have you had to tell your loved ones unpleasant news? I was confused and upset after this situation. I decided to go to my mother for advice. My mother was always reasonable and fair, and I hoped she would help me. My mother said that cheating was a serious accusation, and it was better to check more carefully to see if I was right about Ed before I told her. But there was still a chance that Olivia wouldn't believe it. Love is blind. We often do not notice or do not want to notice the shortcomings of our second half. The next day, Olivia called me again, tearfully asking me to take Ed to a jewelry store in a nearby town. Only there they sold the wedding rings they needed. And my finger was exactly the same size as Olivia's. I couldn't refuse her. But it was hard for me to do it after what I saw. I didn't know how to behave with Ed. On the way, he was unusually silent and thoughtful. I didn't want to talk to him either. Then, all of a sudden, he said that he had seen me from the hotel window yesterday and knew that I had also seen him with another woman. He thanked me for not telling Olivia about it and asked what he could do for me as a token of appreciation for my silence. He said that he was ready to fulfill any whim of mine, even the most forbidden. I definitely didn't expect this. Actually, I wanted to tell her, but I just felt sorry for my friend. And now I saw that Ed wasn't even sorry for what he'd done and started flirting with me in a brazen way. What an asshole! I was mad at him, but I didn't show it. I had a plan in mind. I said that I didn't blame him for his innocent pranks and was ready to support them. Ed took it as an invitation, stopped the car, and kissed me right on the mouth. I barely managed to turn on the photo mode on my phone and secretly shoot it. Now I had dirt and at least some proof that he was a womanizer and wouldn't miss a skirt. I didn't flirt with him again, and I tried to avoid being close to him all the way. Ed was deeply unpleasant to me. He lied to my best friend and was willing to cheat on her, even with me. We bought the rings. They were very beautiful. Too bad it was all for nothing. After this trip, I planned to open Olivia's eyes so that she would cancel this wedding and not link her life with a traitor. We met at a beauty salon. She was getting a wedding manicure. I decided to start talking about Ed right away. But I started from afar so that I could gradually prepare my friend. I asked her if she was sure she wanted to get married because marriage was for life. And what if Ed was not the right person she wanted and she was badly mistaken in his account? After all, they were so little acquainted and did not have time to get to know each other properly. Olivia looked at me and said I was just jealous. I was offended by those words because I wanted Olivia to be happy and I wanted to save her from a broken heart. She didn't believe my intentions. So I just took out my phone and showed her a photo of me and Ed kissing in the car. The facts should have changed her mind. Olivia saw the picture and burst into tears. I put my arms around her and started stroking her hair, reassuring her that she would find someone better than Ed, that everything was still ahead of her, and this was not the last love of her life. When Olivia calmed down, she looked at me and thanked me for showing my true face before her wedding. Olivia accused me of seducing Ed, called me a traitor, and forbade me to appear at the wedding or in her life at all. That's how I lost my best friend. Olivia demanded that I leave and not spoil her pre-wedding mood and prevent her from preparing further. I left the salon with tears in my eyes. I was so hurt that my friend didn't believe me. We had been through so much with her. I was willing to do a lot for her. And because of some jerk who didn't deserve a hair off of her head, she ended our long-standing friendship. It was my fault, too. My plan to expose Ed had failed miserably. Yeah, the photo of me kissing him wasn't the best solution. I looked like a scheming seductress, and he looked like an innocent victim. Ed would probably get away with it and blame it on me. Despite Olivia's hurtful words to me, I really wanted to complete my plan. My friend had to be rescued from this freak. He would ruin her life, and I had no choice but to turn to Olivia's brother, Max. He was 20. He'd known Ed longer than any of us, so I doubted Max would take my side. But I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to prevent this wedding in any way possible. I showed Max a photo of me kissing Ed, told him about seeing him in the window with another woman the day before. I begged him to believe me and help me prevent Olivia from marrying this traitor. Max looked at me incredulously at first. And then I told him that Olivia had broken off her friendship with me and forbidden me to go to the wedding. But it didn't matter to me because I only wanted what's best for her, so I was doing everything I could to get Ed out of her life. Have you ever tried to help your friend against his will, even if he no longer considered you a friend? Max knew what our friendship meant to Olivia and how I felt about her, and he often called us sisters. He knew that I would never wish my friend any harm. So Max agreed to help, but offered to collect even more evidence of Ed's infidelity. We decided to start tracking him. Max said that Olivia and Ed were planning to go to the mall to buy some small items for the wedding. I went there in the hope that Ed would slip up and somehow give himself away and I would take a picture of it. But I was so involved in tracking that I didn't notice when I went towards Ed and Olivia. They saw me immediately. I said hello to them and Olivia pretended not to know me. It stuck with me. She ignored me but forgave Ed, who was really guilty before her, and smiled sweetly at him. I wanted to talk to her again and explain everything. I missed her and our friendship. And then, suddenly, I got a text from Olivia saying that she would be waiting for me in 5 minutes in the cosmetics department. This both pleased and alarmed me. Why did she pass me with such a haughty air? I ran like a bullet to the cosmetics department to find out. Olivia rushed over there, anxious and lost. She looked depressed. Olivia had discovered Ed's texts with a girl, and they had discussed a lot of juicy details about the previous evening when Ed had allegedly met with friends about a bachelor party. Olivia immediately remembered my photo and what I'd said about it, and she had the general impression that Ed wasn't who he said he was, that he didn't love her and had affairs. But Olivia was afraid to cancel the wedding. Everything was already ready, and she asked me for advice on what to do. I reassured my friend and said that I would support her. I had a plan to expose Ed right at the wedding, as if by accident, and he would disrupt the wedding and make a complete freak of himself in public. This would be a lesson for him. Olivia calmed down a bit, came to her senses, and hugged me just like in the good old days. I missed it so much. I was touched and wanted to get rid of Ed, who had caused us so much trouble. The wedding day came. I should have been there with her, but I had to do it without being seen. So I disguised myself as a waitress. No one ever paid any attention to the servants. Ed didn't see me, and no one could ruin our plan. The moment of the solemn toast and the bridegroom's speech came. Ed went on stage, thanked all the guests for coming, and asked them to open the envelopes in which, according to him, a pleasant surprise was waiting for them. All the guests had such an envelope under their plate, where there should have been a personal message with a wish of gratitude from the bride and groom. But instead, there was a photo of Ed kissing a strange girl, and a printed screen of their romantic texts after a stormy night. I followed Ed for the last few days before the wedding, and I was able to collect dirt that would show everyone who he really was. When everyone saw these pictures, many people began to leave the table. There was a noise in the banquet hall, and someone from Olivia's side even tried to kick him in the ass. Have you ever been a guest at a wedding or other family event, and on one where everything went wrong and the celebration turned into chaos and confusion? I watched from the kitchen doorway. The holiday turned into a family tragedy, and Olivia couldn't stand the tension and disappeared from the crowd. I felt sorry for her, but deep down, I felt elated that Ed had been publicly exposed. He realized what the guests really saw and ran towards the kitchen to get out of sight of the angry relatives of the bride. And then he happened to meet my eyes. He saw my happy face and turned red with anger. Ed realized that I was behind the whole show, that I made it. He came at me furiously as if he were going to kill me. I was even a little confused, didn't know what to expect from him now, and backed away. And then Olivia's parents showed up and they took Ed by the arm and said they needed to talk to him seriously, and they took him somewhere. I finally exhaled. It was over. My friend was saved. I went home with a sense of accomplishment. I had been very tired over the past week. All of these feelings for Olivia, spying on Ed, development of a plan of retaliation and exposure. I was sleeping it off for 24 hours. I thought Olivia needed some time alone too, so I took a break after the wedding and didn't call her for a few days. And then I decided to dial, but found that her number was not available. I started writing to her in social networks, but she banned me. I honestly didn't understand what was going on and what I had done wrong again. I went to Olivia's house to talk to her in person. Her parents opened the door for me. They greeted me with coolness, not even offering to enter. Her parents said that Olivia was going through a difficult time. She decided to completely erase from her life everyone who had anything to do with this failed wedding and reminded of it. And I wasn't just a reminder. It all started when I took that stupid photo of me and Ed kissing. And this photo led to the fact that, at the request of a friend, I sabotaged her wedding. She needed time to accept it and forget it, like a bad dream. But how could Olivia not understand that I just wanted her to be happy and helped her as much as I could? I didn't think that my desire to reveal the truth would put an end to our long-standing friendship. I just wanted to protect Olivia from an unhappy marriage with a cheating husband, and I ended up on the list of people who should be erased along with bad memories. After all, I had the right to talk to Olivia. I really wanted her to explain her disregard for me and maybe change her mind about. I waited for her in the park where she was walking her dog and asked for an explanation from her side. And Olivia said she found out something about me. They'd had a long conversation with Ed after the wedding was disrupted, and he'd confessed, apologized, and said that he wasn't the only traitor and that Olivia should take a closer look at her friend. Ed said that from the very first moment he experienced my equivocal glances. And when I went to the sea with him to choose a place for a photo shoot, I kissed him, and he recoiled from me and said that it was extremely mean. Olivia asked me if it was a kiss. I didn't want to lie to her, and I told her that yes, we kissed, but it wasn't like Ed described. But Olivia didn't want to listen to me anymore. She said she was grateful for my help, but she wasn't ready to keep me around just yet. Olivia didn't trust me anymore, and she was right about something. I hid that kiss. deleted that photo. I didn't say anything. I wasn't being friendly. After this conversation, I decided that I would never again intrude and interfere in the personal lives of my friends, even if they make mistakes before my eyes. My friend has the right to live her life as she wants and learn from her personal experience, make her own personal choices, and not listen to the advice of others. If you are touched by my story, please like and subscribe to my channel. Have a good day and let your loved ones always trust you.
I wanted to run away, but the boys held my hands tightly. No, let me go. I tried to pull away, but it was all in vain. They shouted that now I belong to them, and they belong to me forever. I recently transferred to a new closed school, one of the best in the country. I dreamed of finding friends there, but everyone in class already divided into companies. And instead of accepting me, my classmates, one by one, started making fun of my hairstyle. Yes, I have lush red hair, but this is not a reason to call names. If it wasn't for Dean, I don't know how I would have coped. We knew each other since the first grade, and he also moved to the city with his parents. We always had fun together. He even tried to hit on me once, but I firmly declared that we were friends. The same cannot be said about Pedro. When I saw him, I could barely stand on my feet. He was so mysterious, silent, and he never teased me. So I decided to admit my sympathy for him anyway. I took a quick step towards him, but in the middle of the way, Lizzie blocked my way. Anything but that. Lizzie was my roommate on campus, and she hated me. From the first day, she mocked me because I was new, and she clearly did not want to let me into the company where she was the most popular. Lizzie abruptly snatched the backpack from me and threw it behind the locker, and then she grabbed my arm and hissed angrily at me not to even go near Pedro, and then she left with him, arm in arm. I felt overwhelmed. Lizzie always ruined my life. I was sick of it. Dean cheered me up a little. He helped me get my backpack and offered to walk me home. No, Dean, I'm not up to you right now. I need Pedro. And why does that stinker Lizzie decide who I communicate with and who I don't? In the evening, I was surfing the internet in search of a reliable way to make a guy fall in love with me, when suddenly an advertisement with a recipe for a love potion appeared on the entire screen. This was my chance to attract Pedro. I wouldn't even have to flirt and try to choose the time when Lizzie was not around. I would just give you a potion and that's it. I needed to go to the store for ingredients. I spent the whole night making the potion, trying to be as quiet as possible so as to not wake Lizzie. And in the morning, everything finally came out. I immediately poured the potion into a bottle of water. I would give it to Pedro during a lesson in the pool. But when I was walking with an open bottle to Pedro, who was swimming at the side of the pool, Lizzie tripped me up. In the same second, I fell to the floor, dropping the bottle right into the pool where the whole class was swimming. Heck! And then the coach yelled at me to swim 100 meters with the others. I nodded and climbed into the pool when suddenly the boys picked me up and carried me right over the water. I tried to escape with bewilderment, the coach shouted, and the boys said that they were crazy about me. I struggled out of their hands and ran headlong into the hall. What was that? I didn't understand anything. But then, Pedro came up to me. He asked with a smile if I would go to lunch with him. I even swayed. Of course, yes. Pedro replied in an orgy of excitement that this was the highest award for him, and I was beside myself with happiness. Did the potion work? We went to lunch together. I sat down next to Pedro and was already looking forward to how nice we would spend time, when suddenly some other boys started pulling Pedro by the hand. Then more boys came up to us, and everyone wanted to sit with me. And then one of them couldn't stand it and threw the mashed potatoes in the other's face, and then it started. Everyone was throwing food at each other. I tried to stop them, but instead, I myself got in trouble. I had mashed potatoes on my head. My face was all in the salad sauce. I realized that the love potion seemed to work on everyone who was in the pool. Suddenly, the principal came to the dining room, and everyone froze. He gave us a stern look and asked who the culprit was. The boys immediately pointed at me and said dreamily, "All this for her." The principal even turned purple with anger and told me to come to school with my parents tomorrow. After that, he left. Heck! I rushed away from the dining room, but my classmates surrounded me on the stairs and showed me a portrait. It depicted a crooked-nosed, oblique girl. She was not like me at all, but one boy shouted that I was breaking his heart. For my sake, he was ready to draw a new portrait from life. I wanted to leave, but then the boys grabbed me tightly while that half-artist was drawing something. They shouted that now I belong to them and they belong to me. Forever. And then I saw Pedro. He was standing aside and immediately asked for help. But Pedro just laughed and grabbed my hands tightly. This potion had driven him crazy. And then someone shouted to the boys to let me go. And the next second, he abruptly snatched me out of their hands. Dean, holding hands. We rushed away from our classmates together. It was only in the hallway that Dean slowed down and said that he wanted to tell me something. Blushing, he blurted out that he was still in love with me. Oh no, he was bewitched too. I pushed Dean away and ran out into the street. I had to run home. But there were boys standing at the exit of the school. When they saw me, they started singing about how much they loved me. It was like they were on an island and I was the only survivor of all the girls. What nonsense! Everyone around started laughing. What a shame! When I ran home, I locked myself in my room and immediately tried to find a recipe for an antidote on the internet. But in vain. What should I do? I couldn't hide forever. And then I heard strange rustling under the window. Slowly, I approached it and oh my god, my classmate was climbing up the pipe to me, shouting that we were made for each other. I slammed the window shut, my heart pounding. Hell, when will it end? Now I wanted just calmness and not love. At night, I saw boys in the window, and Lizzie chatted with someone on the phone all night and left at dawn. And just after she left, someone knocked. I cautiously looked through the peephole. Dean was standing there. Go away! I won't let you in. But then, Dean shouted that he was not bewitched. And no one was bewitched. This was all a joke that Lizzie organized. She saw me making a potion in the room and decided to make fun of me and put the boys up to it. Lizzie suggested that Dean participated in this, in exchange offering friendship and connections, but he refused. I snorted and opened the door, but I was still wary. It couldn't be, because Pedro was definitely bewitched. He invited me to dinner, and he held me with everyone when they painted the portrait. But then Dean looked down and sighed. Pedro was the first to support Lizzie's plan. He was the one who came up with a food prank. Pedro, how could you do that? Dean said that he was not playing, confessing his love to me. My cheeks burned. Dean, you found the time to say this. I need to deal with Lizzie. It turned out that today, she and the boys were going to complete their prank and pour paint on me to make a fool of me in front of the whole school. This infuriated me. Well, no. The next day, we were ready to take revenge. I hid near the locker room and waited until all the girls, except Lizzie, came out of there. That's when I signaled to Dean. He immediately told the boys that I was alone in the locker room. It was time to act and turned off the lights. The boys, shouting, "Accept the imprint of our love as a gift," ran there and poured paint on the girl standing there. After an angry shout, the lights turned on, and everyone saw covered with paint Lizzie. Then, I appeared from behind the hiding place and grinned. How do you like the prank? Lizzie started shouting that I would be alone forever and no one would definitely communicate with me after this. I laughed. It's better to be alone than to hang out with such rotten people as you and your gang. I left school with Dean. It finally dawned on me that none of Lizzie's company was worthy of my attention. And Dean was the only one worth trusting. In the evening, we agreed to meet again and have a heart-to-heart talk. And how I didn't notice before how honest and noble Dean was. Sometimes, in the race for something impossible, we do not notice the happiness that is always before our eyes. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you!